Hello, my fellow bookkats. Welcome to our very first episode of our podcast. We're coming at you with our first book review, but here's a little about your host, Miss Cat herself, also known as me. Hi. I'm an American teen. My pronouns are she, her, and I love fiction novels, dystopian romance, murder, pretty much whatever. I'll be on it, and I will be sharing my opinion with the world through my podcast. I'm a bit of a writer myself. I will occasionally share original pieces, written by myself, of course, on our podcast here, and I hope you guys don't mind that. One last thing about me is I'm a huge advocate for animal and human rights, and at the end of each of these podcasts, I will be sharing with you an animal that is going extinct. And in the description area below the podcast, there will always be a link to charities for animal preservation. Well, let's get into the book review. The book we're going to be talking about today is about an American teen named Riley with really bad anxiety, and they happen to be gender fluid, which is pretty darn cool, if you ask me. We support and we love the LGBTQ+ community on this podcast, and if there is any hate towards that group in the comment section, in anywhere, you're most likely going to get blocked. Just PSA, welcome to my podcast. So Riley is a gender fluid child, which means pronouns. They go from sometimes being a male, sometimes being a female, and sometimes being in between, which I am not the greatest at explaining this because this is not a situation I can relate to, because the gender I was assigned and the gender that I feel is my gender identity. But the way Jeff Garvin, that's his last name, the way Mr. Garvin presents the idea of being gender fluid is as more of a dial, like an empty or full gauge on your car. So some days Riley feels more feminine, and some days they feel more masculine, and other days they feel neither. They're kind of somewhere on the gauge in between. And it's not just, wake up in the morning, this is my gender assigned today. It can change throughout the day, and we see how hard it is for them, Riley, to deal with how unaccepting and how judgmental their fellow classmates are until they make two friends. One is a girl named Beck, and the other is a boy named Solo. Solo is not necessarily the star of the football team, but he's a lineman on the football team, and Beck is very much like Riley, not in the gender dysphoria, gender fluid way, but Beck is a very punk, I want to say emo goth, but we don't stereotype here. She's very spunky, punk, rock, feisty, we love her. And Beck and Riley eventually end up dating. It's really just about Riley, this book is, and her experience going through all this. And they are a closeted gender fluid person, and they have anxiety and depression and suffer from mental illnesses that many American teens and adults and people all around the world deal with. And they go to a therapist, which is something I recommend. Therapy is great. Therapy is very therapeutic, as the name would hint. Their therapist recommended to start a blog. Their online name is Alix, A-L-I-X, which is a beautiful spelling of that name, in my opinion. And they write about gender dysphoria, gender fluidity. Is fluidity even a word? I don't even know. Well, we're going to say it. and I'm very sorry if this offends anyone by me saying fluidity. And they blog about basically their life, and they seek refuge in the online community. But, as all good books are, there's a problem. You know, we stand the good problem cycle in a book. An unnamed commenter decides to expose, or attempt to expose, not attempt, I guess, so much as threatens to expose Riley's real identity, which is Alex online, but Riley in real life. And her father is a congressman who is running for re-election. Oh my goodness, I can't speak today, which is not good for the first episode of our podcast. Anyway, so their father is running for re-election, and all of the pressure from the media makes Riley's identity, real identity, instead of as Alex, a huge secret. So Riley has to make a choice with the unnamed commenter who's threatening to expose their online identity. So they're threatening to expose Alex as Riley. And Riley is closeted. I don't know if I mentioned that. And keeping their identity as a secret is a huge part and influence on their father's campaign. And so Riley is faced with a choice. Dun, dun, dun. They either have to walk away from the new community they found, the new friends, the new, pretty much, lifeline that they found, or they can stand up and they can come out and essentially risk everything, risk their father's re-entry in the resurrection, the re-election, pardon my mouth fumble, or, they could give it all up, which, I don't know about you guys, but that would be an extremely hard choice. If I didn't have a support group, if I didn't know what was going to happen when I came out as gender dysphoria or gender fluid, then I would be terrified. And you can, Garvin does a really, really spectacular job of showing emotion through the character and really kind of putting you in Riley's shoes and thinking about, oh hey, I'm kind of this person who's doesn't fit in really at all, and who's gender fluid, punk, snarky, rebellious, really all over the spectrum. And how terrifying it must be to have people do extremely awful things. And we keep this podcast PG, so we're not going to go into those things. But they go through some rough things and have to do some pretty hard things with dealing with how the football team, mainly at their school, treats their gender identity. And eventually this lands them in the hospital because something bad happens. And let me tell you, the emotion that is captured in this book, the raw hurt, the anxiety, the terrified feeling of just not being accepted was enough to keep me up at night. And I got in so much trouble in so many of my classes for reading this book, because all I would want to do is I would just want it to keep going. And when it ended, and in the middle, and when the climax happened, oh my goodness, I was in tears. Well, it's not really a good judge of things. I'm a very sensitive person, and I cry quite often, which is a unique quality about me. So, just pro tip there. It's really an emotional book. It's a beautifully written, beautiful way of describing this amazing human being and how difficult their life is. And it's really, really difficult for Riley to be the way they are. And it's phenomenal how they get through it and how they realize that, hey, there's other people like me out there. Riley, when Beck and Riley first start dating, Beck decides to take Riley to an LGBTQ plus support group community place. And it's really amazing. Like, the whole vibe there, there's a transgender male to female woman there, and her name is Mike Michelle, and she abbreviates or hyphenates her name because she wants to show people that, hey, I am a congresswoman. I don't know if she's in Congress, but I am a government official, and yeah, I am transgender, and that is something that I wear pridefully, and that to me is just amazing. And you really just get, there's so much hate in this book until the end, and eventually you really get to see the community that just rallies around Riley, and it's hard. It's so hard. Riley goes through so much through this book, and we see so much character development through the parents and even the people, like the minor characters at school. We see, oh my goodness, Garvin is one of my new favorite authors. I'll leave a little list of my favorite authors in my YouTube bio. So just this book, we're gonna rate it on whiskers. We're gonna have a whisker rating system. It's gonna be fun. So 0 whiskers is wouldn't recommend. Awful, there wasn't really any growth, any character arc, any plot to the story, and it was just kind of like a waste of time. And 10 whiskers, no, we're gonna go with 9 whiskers. 9 whiskers? Yeah, 9. 9 whiskers is going to be, oh my gosh, best everything. Best character growth, best plot, best timeline, best word use, best everything. And honestly, I would rate this a 7.5 whiskers out of 9. Like, this was one of the most touching books I've read in a very long time, and just, you really feel the struggle. Like, you feel Riley's struggle with people giving them weird looks for being the way that they are. And I don't know, my aesthetic, a little bit about me physically, is I tend to wear darker colors, darker clothing, black, got black painted nails, black ripped jeans, black shirts, long sleeve shirts, everything. And this is nowhere near the range that Riley's story is in, but in my community, people who wear black aren't really accepted all that much. And I'm not going to go into that all that much, but I've felt the weird stares that Garvin perfectly describes in this book, and it's real. Like, let me tell you. Actually, I'm not going to tell you. That's it's a conversation for a different time. But just, he captures the emotion and the feeling of just being judged. Not even just judged and ridiculed. That feeling in this book is just so powerful, and it just makes you cry. Like, honestly, this book is beautiful. So 7.5, I think that's what I said last. 7.5 whiskers out of 9. I didn't give it full stars because it was really intense. Like, this was an intense book. Sometimes I had to put it down, go for a walk, say a prayer. I'm religious, and goodness gracious, man, this book is beautiful. So 7.5 whiskers out of 9. That's a very high rating. That's 1.5 until Is my math right? I don't even know if I worded that properly. We'll get the hang of this. This is just the first episode. Bear with us, friends. We'll get through it. Anyways, so that is Jeff Garvin's Symptoms of Being Human. And on the cover of this book, let me just tell you, the colors on this book, it's black, white, green, and purple. And let me just tell you, that is the gender fluid pride flag. Oh my heavens, I just realized that. All right, we love that, we stan. And on the cover of this book, and on like the side and on the back reads, the first thing you're gonna wanna know about me is, am I a girl or a boy? And on the front, the answer is simply yes. And really, if you think about it, sometimes you can't narrow it down to just boy or girl. Sometimes there's more to it. And as of content and like explicit content, like sexual interactions, cursing and things like that, there is some language in this book. Then there's a couple F words. Just if you're sensitive to that, like if you're for a book that just no cursing, no anything, then this is not the book for you. It's not quite as vulgar as, say, a high school hallway, but, it's high school students who really could clean up their language a little bit. So, just fair warning, there is some language to this book. There is one scene that is very intense and non-descriptive, but intense, regarding sexual assault and bullying and physical violence, and there's a little bit of that in this book. So my unofficial opinion, I suppose, would be wait until you're old enough to handle those things, and wait until you're old enough to understand that, oh hey, this actually really happens sometimes to people, before you read this book, because it can be a lot to handle, and it can be pretty rough sometimes. So read this book knowing that there are some heavy topics in here. This is a real life book. This is, I don't think this is based off of a true story, but there's stories like this going on all over the place. And yeah, it's real life. And wait to read this book until you can understand that. That's my opinion. And all of this podcast was my opinion. And I am very sorry if my opinion has offended anyone. And if I have slipped up on pronouns, I'm very sorry. I'm human. And pronouns are difficult. I find myself trying. This is a tip from my own therapist. So pro tip here. Try and use someone's name if you can't remember their pronoun. Which for me, names are harder to remember than pronouns are. But, be respectful. And I think that's going to be it for this review. Goodness gracious. Podcasting is harder than I think. Okay. Our endangered animal for this episode is, drumroll please, the Galápagos penguin. Oh my heavens, they are adorable. They are penguins that live, as the name suggests, they live near the Galápagos area, and there are fewer than 2,000 left, and they are very endangered. So we would love it if you can, if you're in a financial situation that allows you to donate, to visit the link in my bio, or whatever that is. It's description, I think. Visit the link down there and take a look and see how you can help the Galápagos penguins or any other species that is important to you. That's going to be it for the end of our very first episode of the thebookkats podcast. Oh my goodness, we did it. We're alive. Oh, this was difficult, but it's going to be so much fun. I'm going to try and post a video every other week as time allows. And yeah, that's it, my feline friends. Stay fierce and remember, love conquers all. See you in the next one.